Hi, this week we're looking behind the scenes at the photography on the Cape Town cycle tour, known to many thousands of people as the Argus. I'm going to be going through 4 years worth of photos just to show you what goes on behind the scenes, what happens when we have bad weather, and some of the stuff that you just cannot plan for. So here we go. Image 1, and this goes back to 2017. This is at the very start of the race in the start shoots, and if you're wondering why everybody is sitting down on the ground, not standing up, then this is the reason why. There was phenomenal wind in 2017, which eventually led to the race being stopped, and most of the field didn't even get across the start line.
Mother Nature apparently getting in the way of a 40-year tradition. Check it out. Cape Town, South Africa. We laugh because everybody's okay, but I mean, these are gale force winds that forced the bike ride to be canceled. Wow. Wind gusts at 62 miles an hour. 35,000 cyclists had to head home early.
For me, I was following the front of the field, the men's elite in that race, so we did manage to start. And this was coming down from the top of Edinburgh Drive onto the M3 freeway, the Blue Route freeway. And the wind at this stage wasn't too bad. The riders were making a good show of it. This is quite an interesting shot, and I've included it for a reason. It's not even particularly a good shot or even massively in focus. But you could ask yourself the question, why is the photographer / video guy on the back of the motorbike just not sitting facing backwards? And it's a question I get asked all the time. Why don't you face backwards? Or the motorbike rider will ask me, do you want to face backwards? And although technically it's legal to do so in South Africa, it's against the UCI regulations. And I've included a link to the complete regulations for how the motorbikes and the route operates on UCI events. And it makes fascinating reading, so I'd urge you to have a look at that. It'll answer a lot of your questions. This was at the end of the Blue Route freeway, just as it turns left to Muizenberg or right up Kaapseweg. These are the commissaires of the race stopping the event, and we would go no further than that. And that is the view the riders got as they came there. Cut off, go no further. The riders, of course, there's a photo opportunity and everything. That's how far they still had to go. I managed to get their photo and all their smiles, but they weren't particularly happy, but they were understanding. Moving on to 2021, we missed 2020, obviously because of COVID and the lockdowns, etc. And this year I was photographing the elite women's race, which starts in Fish Hoek, so they can have a race that isn't interfered with by the men's elite. It's interesting to note the logistics of how all of this happens. For instance, we, as a photography team, we have a meeting that starts at 4 a.m. in Greenpoint, just to make sure everybody knows everything and any new updates and information. Then we'll hop on our motorbikes, shoot down to Fish Hoek for the race start, which actually starts just after sunrise, but it's still incredibly dark. You'll see in some of the other photos from the following years. But this is starting up Smithswinkle Bay with the sun just peeping over and shining through the bicycle frames, and I like this shot. Coming up further up Smithswinkle Bay, I rush forward on the motorbike. How you do the elites on this race, how I do the elites on this race anyway. I'll hop on the bikes, shoot forward, shoot from the side of the road, get back on the bike, overtake the peloton, do it over and over, just sort of rolling with the peloton. Because if you sit next to the peloton and photograph, all of your photographs are going to look the same. They're all from the same perspective, the same angle, and the same camera angles. So there's just a glimpse of the peloton through the trees and the bushes. Over onto Kaapseweg, Noordhoek Beach on the right-hand side, Candice Lill in the front. And this is, again, on Chapman's Peak. It's a very, very difficult place to shoot because where the cyclists are, it's almost always in the shade. And to the right is bright sunshine. The side of the mountain and the path stops the sun getting to the riders. So it's very, very tricky to photograph them. Coming onto the finish line of that year, of 2021, Emma Pennant-Brown has hit the ground at the back. She was fine. There she is, just catching her breath, but she got up. She's a triathlete, she's tough. And she carried on, come back the next year. Just of shadows, always looking for something different. And when you've got bright sunshine and dark shadows, and try and get something quirky like that. So this one, having come back from the elite women's ride, I then have to file the photographs from the men's and women's finish to the organisers so they can send those out in press releases. And then I get back on the motorbike and do another loop of the circuit. This was before the 44-kilometre shorter route was introduced. So here we are down at the bottom of Edinburgh Drive, just at the start of the M3, the water point there, and the riders taking photographs and city officials. The Avis bike repair station. They're always doing a good service and a lot of people use them. And this was 2021, remember, so everyone in the water station is wearing masks and gloves because we don't want to catch the plague. A further one of through the barriers of how people were filling up their water bottles. It's a very efficient system. Moving back over to Chapman's Peak, just the start of Chappies with Noordhoek Beach in the background, and how the riders will stop and take photographs, and it's all about memories and fun and camaraderie. Just moving sideways from where I was, just 90 degrees to the right, wide angle lens, similar sort of photo. The dejection shot. I'm sure he was fine, but he was sitting on the side of the road feeling very sorry for himself by the looks of it. Another sort of abstracty shot, riders through the bushes. They're coming from the right of the photograph down and through that gap. I'd have loved it if they're coming the other direction so I'd see the face, but I don't. And that one with the shadows and the silhouettes and the rock-catching nets up on the side of Chappies. Wider of the Rider, that's a PPA initiative, which I'm sure everybody who cycles in South Africa knows. This is coming through the toll gates at the end of Chapman's Peak, going down into Hout Bay. Now on to 2022, which is probably the hardest race I've ever photographed in my life. Conditions were absolutely dire. This is Cathcalind in front of it's a pharmacy in Fishhook Main Road. This is where the elite women start. As I said, they ride a shorter distance, but then there's no interference between them and the men's race, so everybody gets a fair and a clean race. This photograph appealed to me because of the guy in the poster staring and her concentrating. I remember I said these conditions were dire. This was just a warm-up for what we were going to get with the rain. You'll see this is quite an interesting phenomenon. If you don't know how it works, you'll see those bright white dots. That's because I've got a flash on the camera shining directly in front of the camera, so it's illuminating and flashing back, reflecting those raindrops in the air. If I had it off camera with a little remote control, it would mitigate against that, but then I'd need both hands to take one photograph, and that can't be done when you're on the back of a motorbike. You see those reflective dots. This is going out over past Glencairn towards Simonstown and through Simonstown on the main road, and now you're starting to see water reflections from the little drops of water on the lens as well as those in the air. This is now over the top of Smithwickle Bay and down on the road towards Scarborough and Misty Cliffs. The weather's a little bit better here and not quite as wet. You've got to admire the courage of those women in that peloton in those weather conditions all sticking together. I think I would be out the back and dropped where it's a lot safer. Down over Misty Cliffs, and for once it was misty, and the rain has just temporarily stopped here. I like the picture of the sea and the way it blends into the sky. Now we're on to Chapman's Peak, and this is where the semi-tunnel that protects motorists from rock falls is. You can see there's a bit of a crash going on in the background. I can't remember who it was. I think it was Tiffany Keep was in there somewhere. Don't quote me on that. There's also still in that same tunnel, see the glare of light on the left-hand side. That's caused by the headlight of one of the motorcycles. And it's always super, super dark in this tunnel. If you look at the ISO on that one, it's 25,600, which is as high as I'll take it. But it means that the photograph's never going to be tack sharp when you're shooting in those conditions. Also, you'll see the shutter speed is at 1/400th of a second, which on the 400mm zoom is also going to mean that it's not going to be a super sharp image, but you've got to get what you can get. There's the tunnel that I've been talking about. Still quite dry over that side of the pass. You'll see that's about to change very, very shortly. And this is the top of Seikabossi as they climb out of Hout Bay. It was pouring down. It was very, very difficult to see. A couple more shots of the rainy conditions with the motorcycle lights, and it was really quite dramatic and gloomy. But it was at this stage now getting very cold because soaking wet and the wind chill factor. This is the last shot I've got of them going over the top of Chappies. What I do now is I'll always leave the riders there at the top of Chappies. I'll get on the motorbike and we'll go as fast as we can to the finish so that we can get the finish line shots of the men and women's elite. So we can't afford to be caught up in any races or have any delays. And it's that caused my big problem in this race, was because going at 80 or 90 kilometers an hour of soaking wet without any real protective rain clothing, the wind chill factor really got to me. This is the race winner coming across, and you'll see this photograph and the photograph of the men's elite isn't particularly sharp, purely because I was hunched on the ground, sitting down on the curb, shivering like I've never shivered before, and the poor camera shooting at its maximum length, focal length of 400mm, and this was never going to be super sharp. I've never had an experience like that before. That's the men's race. It's not particularly sharp, as I said. Can you see how all the water from his gloves is getting thrown out as he's bashing his fist into the air in victory? And then straight back out onto the route, having filed my shots of the winners and had a warm cup of coffee in the media room, and out for another loop. Luckily, the weather did improve a lot after this, but it makes great photos with the rain flying off the back wheels. You can do all sorts of things, and also the colours and saturation. It all changes when it's raining like this and just becomes so much nicer. Chopper being flown by the infamous Skulk Bunsai over Chappies. He's obviously doing the television stuff with a Cinemax camera underneath, and it makes for spectacular photographs and just gives a little bit of edge as to what's going on. Again, through Chapman's Peak and the folds of the mountain and the pass. Always look for something slightly different. I think this is an 8-shot panorama of Chapman's Peak, and they say you can't take panorama shots of sport. Well, you can. You just have to be clever with your editing, but this is one of my favourite shots of the event that year. I made a fool of myself here. I climbed up the outside of this rock, getting all the way up to that Chapman's Peak sign to photograph it, only to discover there's a set of stairs at the back of it. It takes you exactly there. So live and learn. Use that the next year. I particularly like signs being held up by spectators. They always tell a story and they add to the event and show what the spectators are up to and the gears behind the event. This is about halfway up Seikabossi, looking out over the Hout Bay and the sea. This photo tells a story that I like. It's teammates helping teammates, 2 pushing 1. Happy chaps, they made it to the finish. And coming down to the big traffic circle in Sea Point, trying to get the local scenery and Lion's Head in the photo. It's very seldom you can get that. When you battle against Table Mountain and the riders' faces all in one shot. This was just after one of the Evergreen ships had done its funny thing in the sewers and blocked the canal for a month. So it was, at the time, very topical, and it amused me. This is moving on to 2023, and just to illustrate how dark it is at the start. Personally, I hate using a flash on my camera. In this case, really didn't have any choice in the matter. You just have to get it. Coming out from Simonstown towards Miller's Point, it's still actually quite dark here. The sun hasn't risen over the horizon yet. Just managed to make it look like it has in the editing just by increasing the exposure quite a bit. But it's the only way you're going to get photographs like this at that time of the day on that road. And just to illustrate that, there's the sun peaking over the horizon, and this is going up to the top of Smithswinkle Bay. It's the very last right-hander. Anyone who's ridden in Cape Town will know this corner well. The feeling of relief as you get around it. I like the way the sun is coming through the peloton of riders and reflecting off the frames and off their legs. Ineos Grenadier, the manufacturer of that vehicle in front, is one of the supporters of the race and has been for a couple of years, so it was important to get a photograph of them in the front leading the riders through. And this was as good a place as any to get it. It's from the top of Smithswinkle Bay down to Scarborough. Coming down across Misty Cliffs, still trying to get any kind of light on that road. It's just dark and in shadow, although out into the sea it's very, very bright because the sun isn't occluded by the mountain. So it's tricky to edit, you have to be quite creative. It's not always conducive to the best photographs, but it's what you've got to do. Again, this is coming down to Scarborough with the bunch, and I like the way the bushes go up the mountain, up to Black Hill. And again, you can see all the media bikes on the left-hand side of the photograph. And don't forget to have a look at that UCI document in the description. Coming down after the first climb on Chappies, before the real climb starts. Not a massive fan, as I've told you before, of photographing the back of riders, but sometimes you've got to do it and it works in this case. On this one, you'll see what I'm talking about with the sun being occluded by the mountain so it doesn't hit the riders, and it's just poking up above the mountain on Chappies, at Silver Mine, behind the sun. I love the shadow and the way it shines through the riders. Coming up now onto Chapman's Peak proper with Ashley Moolman Passio in the lead. It's important when you've got a top-class rider like Ashley Passio or Candice Lill, people of that caliber, that you get those photographs because it's critical for the event organisers. They use those in the following years and in all of the publicity and the race reports and press releases. Candice Lill on the front, Ashley Passio on the left. Coming still on Chappies. Note the poor guy in the video. Bike right at the back. Up over Seikabossi. Sun's come out now. It's a stunning day and we're starting to get very harsh shadows on the riders, so makes photography not as pretty. And the winner coming over the finish line. Beautiful sunny day. Jobs are good in there. Okay, so having filed those race winners' photographs from the men's and women's elite was quick cup of coffee and a muffin, and on the back of the motorbike and shoot across to the start of the 44-kilometre race, which was introduced in 2023. And that started on the Grand Parade. It's great to see the wheelchair riders and the charity riders, etc. there. Table Mountain in the background, one of the very few places you'll get a decent photograph of Table Mountain with the riders looking at you. That's Jordan Hill Lewis, Mayor of Cape Town, who rode the event that year with one of his constituents. Makes a great photograph, and that's the sort of photograph you have to get for the organisers. And up over past the windmill on Rhodes Drive towards UCT, the empty road on the right-hand side, but it wasn't actually closed to traffic. It was just so early, there was no one on it. On to 24, just to close off and give some finality, and obviously this is Fishhook Main Road with the elite women starting in. So far I've shown you lots of cycling photographs, but nothing of what happens at the start for the riders. So they're going through registration, which is in the pitch dark in Fishhook Main Road, outside Wakeford's Furnishes. Some of the family and friends and shots, some memories being made. This is where they sign on, massive big boards showing they've arrived at the start and they're ready to rock and roll. It's one of the features I like about this race. This is a race that starts before the elite women, which is the under 15 boys race. They go 5 minutes beforehand. And I just enjoyed how the shadows were created with the cars' lights behind them. This is the actual start line for the women's elite outside Wakeford's home stores. Other home stores are available. So low angle of the start line with Sipho Morna, the announcer, chatting to the women. Here you'll see the difficulty. No flash on the camera for this shot, so all I got was silhouettes. Sun hasn't even come over that mountain range in the background yet, but it will shortly. To get some definition of the riders, it's a case of just putting a flash on the camera and giving them a small pop of light just to bring them out, but if you give it too much it's going to look horrible. It already looks false enough with that flash. They've only just left Fishhook here, so it's super early in the morning. It's a similar shot to one that we had in one of the previous years up towards Miller's Point, but from a slightly different perspective and lower down. This isn't a drone shot. This time I actually climbed up the hill to photograph from the top down to the bottom, just to give a different perspective and to show how close they are and how high up. From exactly the same spot, but panning to the right as they came past, and the light has completely changed and so have all the colours. And as a matter of interest, one of the problems I have when I take photographs, I'm terrible at getting a straight horizon. And whenever you've got the sea in the background, it's always going to be straight. So I have to rectify every single horizon on every single photograph I take when there's a sea. Now we've reached the very top of Swinkle Bay, and the rider's having a bit of a break and catching up and grouping up in a peloton, but they've actually demolished this peloton in this year in 2024. So there's probably only about 15 riders in this group. Misty Cliffs. We had a shot of Misty Cliffs in one of the previous years, and this is now one where there's no rain and no clouds, and you can get definition of the horizon. And I very much like this shot. The leading peloton coming over Chapman's Peak. Here I'm just trying to get some of the texture in the rocks because they're leading lines from left to right. Coming into Howard Bay by the little traffic circle on the main road going up towards Sekabossi, and a little bit of a breakaway happening here. It's always worth a stroll around in the cool-off area where the elite women and men go after the race, because you're going to get some portraits and some interesting photographs. And I love this one of Cathy Cullen. The light was just perfect. Here we're going back onto the route, shooting some of the 44-kilometre route again, and they were coming up onto the freeway, and it was interesting to shoot them through the railings, the concrete railings for that bridge. I always like to put the road signs when shooting photographs for road racing, because it always shows where you are on the route and gives you some sort of context of distance still to go. This poor chap and the guy behind him are about to have a long walk up Edinburgh Drive. It's a 44-kilometre route, so riders probably aren't as prepared and fit as they could be, but I'm sure they'll prepare and learn their lesson for the following year. Always try to tell the story that's different and unusual. This one does that. For the observant, you'll see that she's actually a mountain biker in a road race. A father pushing his son up Edinburgh Drive, and this really does show what the race is all about. Let's hope the youngster cycles for years. I always love it when a friend of mine comes past. This is Shan, and I had no idea she was coming. I was actually walking in the direction. She shouted at me. I spun around, took the photograph without even focusing on her, and it came out like this. It's beautiful. Another father and son shot. This time they're in fancy dress, which draws the eye and makes it an interesting photograph that can be used for publicity. So always take that. And who doesn't like a pretty dog? This is one of the spectator points down on the M3 freeway. And I saw this dog and thought that would make a great shot. I didn't realize till later just how excited the dog was about it. It's the Crocodile Man. He had only made this costume the day before, apparently, and it boggles my mind how he can make it in such a short time, let alone ride a race like this with it on. And even came with crocodile feet. Very impressive. The essence of the family tour for me is the family participation, not the elites racing at the front, although that's fun to watch and I get a grandstand seat every year. But this of a family with mother, father, daughter and baby in the cart, that's to me the essence of it. High fives for free. Another photo that's great for publicity and just shows the spectator support and the community support for the race. This was just before the turnaround of the 44k route. You'll see it just underneath the blue signs. They turn right across the freeway, piece of tarmac, and head off back towards Cape Town. So it shows the Silvermine Mountain just behind all the riders there. And then they head off back for the 22-kilometre cycle back to Cape Town. That's Tokai Road with Constantiaberg in the background, the mast at the top. And, just putting the race and the ride in the context of where it takes place. A different view, wide-angle lens, shot from a little bit higher with the Cape Flats behind. It's now super low perspective with a 24mm lens, and I like how the riders are both saying hello to me and give me the thumbs up. Again, a photo that could be used for years for publicity for the event. Climb the embankment, Cape Flats in the background, show how many riders are coming up the hill. Bit of a struggle fest, to be honest. This photograph leaves me with so many questions, and I'm sure it does you too, and that's pretty much what photography should be for. This is the finish of the 44k route, sitting in Riebeck Street in Cape Town. A little bit of a horror show with shadows and brights, so it's very, very difficult to work out what your correct exposure should be. So you just hope for the best when you're on the back of a motorbike, and then correct in post. And that's it. That's everything from some of the past editions of the Cape Town Cycle Tour. Hopefully in 2025 I'll be back there to bring you an update. If you like this video, please click the like button. I'd really appreciate that. And if you can bring yourself to subscribe, that would be even better, because it gives me an idea of how many people really do like what I'm doing. Until next time, cheers.